Speaking this morning is our associate pastor of arts and communication, Darna McGinnis, and she has a tremendous word. And I just want to encourage you. This is the third time that I'm going to hear this word. And after the first two times, there's been a different revelation to me after every single time. I want to encourage you to really tone in and block out all the noise that's around you or internally and listen to what she has to say. And she's going to continue this morning on our series, Big Answers to Big Questions. And as we've been doing throughout this sermon series, each speaker has provided two truths and a lie to the congregation to see if you could guess which one of those three statements is not true. And Darna gave me her list, and I want to share it with you before she comes up. And the first statement that she made is that she is a distant relative to a notorious French pirate. That's a big one. The second one is that she was actually a extra in a Jackie Chan movie. And the last statement that she provided is that she starred as Sandy in her high school production of Grease. So with no further ado, Miss Darna McGinnis.
Jerry. Y'all doing okay? Yeah. Well, okay, first let me let you off the hook here. Am I distantly related to a notorious French pirate? Yes, I am. Jean Lafitte, as a matter of fact. I know a lot of things coming into focus right now, but you know that little bit about me, if you know me at all. Like, oh yeah, no, it makes sense to me. Did I play Sandy in a high school production of Grease? No, I did not. I wish I had. I think I would have rocked that part. However, I was an extra in a Jackie Chan martial arts movie. Go figure. Turns out, I found out after last service, our bass player, Jan, was in the same movie I was in. There's a story. I'm not going to tell you the story. Anyway, great story anyway. But those are just to let you know me a little bit better. Yeah, just a little bit of my past. And if you got Sean's email, he said something about having a sometimes warped sense of humor. I don't know what that's about. You tell one story about a base-jumping hamster, and you're branded for life. So we are continuing in this series, What Are You Doing? Answers to Big Questions. That is my big question, is what are you doing? And I want to start by just asking a question here, simple show of hands. How many of you got up this morning or any morning and said, I want to be completely ineffective? As a somebody? as a mom, dad, employer, employee, whatever, volunteer, did you say, I want to be ineffective today? It's not a trick question. It's probably a pretty stupid question, but it's not a trick question. The point is, none of us get up in the morning and say that. None of us set out to be ineffective. The fact is, we all want to be effective, having an impact, making a difference, changing our world, being influential, being useful, producing our desired or intended results, being effective. We all want to do that. And that is God's plan for us as well. And in Scripture, this idea of effectiveness is summed up in the phrase, bear fruit. John 15:16 says, you did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit, fruit that will last. And so that whatever you ask in my name, the Father will give you. Now, the first question that comes to my mind is, what is fruit? How do you know if you're bearing this kind of fruit that he's talking about? So I'm just going to give you a little partial list. I just did a little word search on it using one of those keyword searches with my, I think it was Bible Gateway online, and came up with a number of scriptures that pertain to the word fruit. I encourage you, do your own study. Don't ever take my word for it. Just do your own study on these things. Look up the word fruit and see what you find. Luke 3:8 talks about the fruit in keeping with repentance. And he goes on to describe that. It's something that it looks like generosity, sharing with those in need, integrity in your financial dealings, contentment with what you earn, not making false accusations, etc., etc., a number of things. Genesis 1:28 says, be fruitful and multiply. Fruit looks like multiplication. Fruit contains within itself the ability to replicate, and not just once, but many times over. So multiplication, exponential growth. Fruit looks like productivity. Psalm 128:2, you shall eat the fruit of your labor, blessings and prosperity shall be yours. Isaiah 32:17, the fruit of that righteousness will be peace. Its effect will be quietness and confidence forever. Fruit looks like more of the Spirit manifesting in us. Galatians 5:22 tells us the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. And if you see in Scripture over and over again this use of the word harvest, the harvest of souls for the kingdom. These are the things that fruit looks like. When we're talking about are you bearing fruit, are you bearing these things? Are you doing these things? Fruit is the evidence of our effectiveness. It's what we're cultivating in ourselves and in others. And God is serious about this. Listen to this warning from Luke chapter 3. Verse 9, Luke is actually quoting John the Baptist. The axe is already at the root of the trees, and every tree that does not produce good fruit will be cut down and thrown into the fire. This is why we have to ask the big question: what are you doing? Is it effective? Turn to Matthew 21, if you have your Bibles. I want to share a story with you from the life of Jesus, starting in verse 18. Early in the morning, as Jesus was on his way back to the city, he was hungry. Seeing a fig tree by the road, he went up to it, but found nothing on it except leaves. Then he said to it, "May you never bear fruit again." Immediately the tree withered. When the disciples saw this, they were amazed. "How did the fig tree wither so quickly?" they asked. Jesus replied, "Truly, I tell you, if you have faith and do not doubt, not only can you do what was done to the fig tree, but also you can say to this mountain, 'Go throw yourself into the sea,' and it will be done. If you believe, you will receive whatever you ask in prayer." Now, Mark chapter 11 gives an account of this same incident, but with a few differences in the details. He added a little bit more to the story. Starting in verse 12 of Mark 11, it says, "The next day as they were leaving Bethany, Jesus was hungry. Seeing in the distance a fig tree in leaf, he went to find out if it had any fruit. When he reached it, he found nothing but leaves, because it was not the season for figs. Then he said to the tree, 'May no one ever eat fruit from you again.' And his disciples heard him say it." If you drop down to verse 20, it'll say the next morning that they went out and they saw that the tree had withered, and they were amazed by this. And it leads to the same conversation as they had before with Jesus. Now, I don't know about you, but when I read that story, the obvious question that comes to my mind is, why did he curse the tree? And the reason is simple: because it looked like it should be fruitful, because it was filled out with leaves. Now, I looked up just a little research on fig trees, and for the fig trees, the leaves precede the fruit. That's typical of any fruit-producing tree. The leaves should actually indicate the presence of fruit. And for a fig tree, it takes approximately 3 years to produce fruit from the time of planting. They bear fruit twice a year, in late spring and in early autumn. And Bible scholars put the timing of this particular incident at early spring. So it truly was too early for fruit. But the fact remains, this tree was filled out with leaves and looked fruitful. It promised satisfaction and didn't deliver. Now, I happen to have a fig tree in my backyard. I got it because I like the leaves. I saw one in someone else's yard, and I asked what it was, and they told me, and I thought, that's going to just what I want it to do. It's in a corner of my backyard, and it fills out the corner, and it fills out with leaves. I don't like figs, so I don't care whether or not this tree produces fruit. But if you're depending on that tree for fruit, and a fig tree is not producing figs, then it's ineffective as a fig tree. And I wonder, though, did the disciples miss that practical object lesson? Were they so impressed with the supernatural because Jesus spoke to that tree, and just the words of his mouth, the tree withers? He curses that tree, and they're amazed by this, and they see this as this lesson in faith, and Jesus, always working on multiple levels, uses that as a lesson for faith for them. But I feel like there's a very practical object lesson that they might have lost. Jesus is confronting ineffective Christianity. Now, what Matthew doesn't recount, and Mark does, because there's this gap between this cursing of the fig tree, and when they saw it the next day that it had withered. And in verses 15 through 19 describes Jesus going into the temple, expecting to find prayer happening, finding instead sort of this marketplace, these money changers, and he turns over the tables and clears out the temple. And you have to make that connection between these very tangible parables that Jesus is acting out for them and what he's actually doing. Now, prior to that, prior to him cursing the fig tree, prior to him clearing out the temple, he had actually told a parable about this very thing. And Luke records this in Luke 13, starting in verse 6. It says that he told this parable. A man had a fig tree growing in his vineyard, and when he went to look for fruit on it, but did not find any. So he said to the man who took care of the vineyard, "For 3 years now I've been coming to look for fruit on this fig tree and haven't found any. Cut it down. Why should it use up the soil?" "Sir," the man replied, "leave it alone for 1 more year. I'll dig around it and fertilize it. If it bears fruit next year, fine. If not, cut it down." Now he tells that story. Then they see him actually cursing a tree that looked fruitful and wasn't. And then they see him clearing out the temple, and then the next day they see that that tree had withered. And in this parable, you can see God's grace and mercy always abound. He gave it 3 years. Well, let's give it 1 more. God gives more and more chances. And while I don't know if the intention of the warning is to say, do what I've given you to do or forever be cut off, I do think it is a warning to us that if God has given us resources, He's given us people to invest in us, He's given us an incredible calling, He's given us opportunities to do great things for the kingdom, and we don't do them, He takes them and gives them to someone who will. This is the parable of the talents. What happens to a tree that takes up valuable time and space and produces nothing? The lesson is God won't tolerate a lack of productivity for long. And it also illustrates religion without substance. Now, I had a challenge trying to encapsulate this into one statement, but here's my main point, and if you're taking notes, write this down. If we want to change the world, it's not enough to be good, we have to be effective. Now, let me explain why I'm making a distinction between good and effective. I want to suggest you can do a lot of good things that aren't necessarily effective. Good is kind of a quality assessment. And the goal may be to impress or simply just to do well. Effective speaks to mission and purpose. It's about intention. It's about influence and impact. There's an end result in mind. Sometimes when we evaluate our efforts, I think we stop at, well, was it good? We need to go the next step and say, yeah, but was it effective? Not every good thing is effective, and not every effective thing will impress you with its qualities. Sometimes less is more. Sometimes simple is better. Good doesn't always produce fruit. Sometimes we can see the pretty leaves and assume that there's fruit. We can't confuse foliage for fruit. Jim Collins, who is a speaker and an author, he's written several books on management. He's been a speaker at the Global Leadership Summit several times. He's written a book, maybe you've heard of it, it's called Good to Great. And in it, one of the statements that you hear over and over again is good is the enemy of great. I want to suggest good is the enemy of effectiveness as well. I have an older brother who was in the military for many years, and as a young Special Forces officer, he had a number of troops in his command, and he wanted them to have the best equipment possible, the best protective gear possible. And one item that he was really trying to fight for was new helmets. He didn't think that the standard issue Army helmet was good enough. He didn't feel like it offered enough protection. What he really wanted for his troops were Kevlar helmets. So he goes to his CO with his requisition form and says, I really want to get helmets for my troops. I don't think that what they have is good enough, not effective enough, and so I want them to have new helmets for better protection. And his CO just kind of looks at the bottom line and says, no, not going to do it. So my brother tries a different approach. He goes, he gets some stats, he does his research, he crunches the numbers, and he builds this report, really impressive and compelling argument, he thinks, and takes it to his CEO and says, here, look through this. This is why I want to get these helmets for the men. And again, the CEO looks at it, just kind of looks at the bottom line and says, no. Well, my brother, being my brother and not really taking no for an answer, he decides to do something a little more demonstrative. He takes a standard issue helmet out to the firing range and shoots a bunch of holes in it. And then he takes this helmet and his report in his requisition form and he puts it on the desk of his CO's CO. Now, guess what happened? He got his helmets. He also got into a whole lot of trouble, so I don't want to encourage anybody to go out and do anything crazy in the workplace. But for him, he wasn't going to play around with this. This was life and death to him. This meant the life and death of his troops and their protection, and he was going to fight for it. So for him, he made what he thought was a much more effective presentation because he wanted a more effective helmet, and he got what he wanted. So the answer to the big question, what are you doing, should be, I'm doing effective things. Now, I want to suggest if we want to create an environment where we are all being effective, where we are cultivating and bearing good fruit in ourselves and in our teams and the people around us, in whatever organization you're a part of, maybe this is something that applies more to you at business. I don't know. But I want to suggest there are some things that we need to have in place if we want to create this environment. These are 3 essential understandings that we need to have. And these may or may not be the ones that immediately come to mind. But the first understanding we need to have is we need to understand the power of encouragement. Now, Willie talked a lot about encouragement last week, but I want to hit this again because I don't think it can be said enough. Hebrews 10:24 says, and let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds. Spur on, that whole idea is about encouraging, motivating, drawing out, speaking to something that you see in another person and drawing that out. Encourage just means simply to give courage to. Now, I love the story of Esther. I'm just going to summarize it for you, but it's a fantastic story on the power of encouragement. Esther is a young Jewish woman, and she's brought into the royal harem of the king of Persia. And she pleases him greatly, so he makes her his queen. There's also at the same time this very ambitious, self-serving government official named Haman. And he deceives the king into condemning the Jews to death. And at that point, Esther finds herself divinely positioned to intercede for her people with the king. But she's afraid, because it's death for her to go to the king unsummoned. Her older cousin Mordecai comes to her and speaks into her the encouragement that she needs. In Esther 4:14, these are Mordecai's words. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this? He speaks to her and calls out of her this greatness that she didn't know was in there. She doesn't even understand her place in this big picture. He shows her place in the big picture. He shows her her place in history. And her response to this encouragement is so amazing. She says, okay, you, Mordecai, you and the Jews go and fast for me for 3 days, and then I will go to the king and intercede for our people. And I love this, and if I perish, I perish. What courage he called out in this young, fearful woman. Down the street and around the corner from my house, one of my neighbors has this sign up on his fence, and you've seen these signs, very ordinary sign. I think they're going to put a picture of it up there. Yeah, beware of the dog. Lots of people have those, and it's meant to warn you, there's a fierce creature somewhere on the property, and just sort of be warned. The real kind of unusual thing about this particular sign is that this is the dog. It's a Chihuahua. And, but here's the thing. I don't know what this owner has said to this dog, but this dog believes that sign. He embodies this sign. This dog is so fierce you would not believe. I mean, he will be in the yard, and even as I'm driving by, in my car, I'm like, don't make eye contact. because he's out there and he's looking, and he's going to run out and bite my tires. Sometimes he's actually in the middle of the street, and he's just like standing his ground. I dare you. And I'm like, okay, going to drive around you. I won't set foot in that yard because I'm going to lose an Achilles tendon if I do. This dog will come at me. He is fierce. And he's like, I know what that sign says. Fear me. And he believes it. Someone has spoken something into this dog, and he believes it. And my little inside joke, I kind of call him Gideon because he sort of reminds me of that story of Gideon, and that's in Judges chapter 6. Israel's in yet another long season of oppression due to their disobedience. This time it's by the Midianites. And God selects Gideon, a farmer, to lead his people out of captivity. And he sends a messenger to Gideon, an angel of the Lord, comes to Gideon. Now get this, Gideon is hiding out in a wine press. He's gone in there to thresh wheat so that the Midianites don't see what he's doing and take the food that he's intending for his family. So he's in hiding, and an angel of the Lord comes to him. Judges 6, verse 12. When the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon, he said, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." Now, who could be farther from a mighty warrior in that moment than Gideon? Hiding, farming, threshing wheat. And probably when he hears that, he's like looking around, okay, who's in here with me? Because you can't be talking to me. And they have this back and forth where the angel is telling him, okay, but here's the assignment God has for you. He wants you to lead his people out of captivity. And Gideon raises every possible objection, talks about all of his limitations and his inadequacies. And the angel just keeps reassuring him, but the Lord's with you, but the Lord's with you. He's going to make sure that you're victorious. Gideon says, but I need some signs. So the angel gives him some signs. Eventually, Gideon starts to believe. And he rises to the challenge. And he succeeds. That's the power of encouragement. This goes beyond the attaboy and the you go girl. This is someone who comes to you and can see your place in the big picture. Who can speak to that scared farmer and call out the mighty warrior that's hidden within. This is someone who can see your potential and draw it out with the right words at the right time. This is someone who gives us courage to face our own fears. This kind of encouragement that presents us with a godly purpose. It challenges our objections and our feelings of inadequacy, and it reassures us that victory is within reach. If you need that kind of encouragement, ask God for it. He'll send you a Mordecai. He'll send you an angel if he has to. He'll send you someone who's going to call out that greatness in you, who can see things that you can't. And if you are that kind of encourager, the scripture tells us there are people gifted with that kind of encouragement. Ask God who needs that encouragement from you. Ask him to send you to someone who needs that encouragement. Romans 6:8 says, if your gift is to encourage, then give encouragement. There are people out there who are just one conversation away from greatness. You can bring that to them. Now, I need to emphasize, I'm talking about people of discernment. And when I mean discernment, I mean that certainty, that knowing that you get from God, that what you're encouraging is true, and it's something that they're going to be effective in. It's something that they're going to bear much fruit in. Because here's the thing, encouragement has an evil twin. She's called flattery. And if we want to be effective, we need to understand not only the power of encouragement, we need to understand the danger of flattery. Now, in a positive sense, if there is a positive connotation to flattery, it's unhelpful encouragement intended to make someone feel good. It's not given out of a bad motive. There's not a bad heart here. It's someone who seriously wants to make another person feel good with uplifting feedback. Unfortunately, it can lead to bad results. I had someone like this in my life back when I was in high school. And she was a friend of mine. Her name was Melanie. She was a couple years older than me. And she was a baton twirler. And fantastic baton twirler. I think she started twirling when she was 2 or something. She ended up getting a full scholarship. She had a room just with her trophies in it. I mean, she's amazing. And she could do all of these amazing things. And for whatever reason, she sort of selected me, her friend, to be her successor because she was going to be graduating. I don't know why I didn't twirl, but she started to encourage me. Now, she could like twirl multiple batons, and she did batons that were on fire, and she had these things that were really scary. They looked like big blades with a hook. They sort of hooked together. She could do all this crazy stuff. And so I started to listen to what she was telling me. That was intended to be encouragement. And so I got the equipment, and I started paying for lessons, and I would go with her. In fact, I went to her teacher, and I started trying to do this thing, and it was ridiculous. I mean, she's this twirler. She could, throw the thing way up in the air, and she would spin like 37 times or something, and then she would just catch that baton without even looking. It just, I don't know, magically just sort of landed in her hand. And so for me, I'm trying these stunts, and I throw the baton up in the air, and I go like this. Because I don't want to get hit. I was afraid of this baton. And I would do that over and over again. I would throw it up and duck. And that's just bad form. I mean, for a baton twirler, just bad form. And yet she would always tell me, oh, you're doing great. Oh, you look good. Oh, this and that. I'm like, no, I don't. For a while, though, I listened, and I let that flattery kind of build me up, and I kept trying to do this thing, and I was wasting money and wasting time. And eventually I just said, Melanie, this is not for me. This is not working. So I went back to just, playing the flute in the marching band, which worked out a whole lot better. But her intentions weren't wrong. She was my friend. I liked what she did. I enjoyed the flattery. I wanted to be able to do that. It just wasn't for me. Now, at its worst, flattery is an insincere or undeserved praise intended to gain favor or manipulate. Now, whether from good intentions or bad, the end result is the same. Whatever you flatter people about, they will continue to do, and many times they shouldn't be. It's not the most effective thing. It's not the thing that God has really called them to do. It's not bearing fruit. Ultimately, flattery is hurtful. It distracts people from discovering what they really should be doing, what they'll be most effective at. And according to Scripture, flattery is just plain wrong. Proverbs 26:28. Here's just a couple of verses. A lying tongue hates those it hurts, and a flattering mouth works ruin. Flattery can ruin a life. Proverbs 29:5, those who flatter their neighbors are spreading nets for their feet. It sets a trap. It traps people into something they shouldn't be doing. And I hate to tell you this, but flattery's kind of a problem in the church. Again, this is not the negative, manipulative kind of flattery, most of the time. It's good-hearted, well-intentioned people who just want to encourage. And I love those people. But in my ministry area, and I've been in music ministry for probably 25 years, I encounter this a lot. Really great people who got flattered, maybe somewhere else, and they come and they tell me, how great they are in music ministry, and then I audition them, and it's like, honey, I don't know who told you that. I'm really sorry. And it would be irresponsible for me to put them in a position where I know they're not going to win. And I really hate having to do that. These are amazing, wonderful, gifted people who have simply been flattered into the wrong thing, something that's not quite the right fit. And it really saddens me because I see them falling short of being effective when I know they can be. In the right way, in the right place, and something that's the right fit, they can be completely effective and bearing much fruit and replicating themselves in others. It's just not this one area. And in the church, chances are they were flattered by someone who was well-intentioned and good-hearted. No one intends to do harm with this. But eventually someone will come along and have to tell them the truth. And it's so much more hurtful when they hear it later. Those of us who are in ministry leadership, we need to be careful that when we are recruiting volunteers for our area, that effort to recruit is based on their gifting and not our need. Our need will cause us to put people into some place where they're not going to be effective. So if we want to achieve the first, that is encouragement, and harness the power of encouragement without falling into the dangers of flattery, we need to understand a third thing, the necessity of candor. And simply put, candor is a frankness, it's openness, it's honesty, it's sincerity, it's unbiased and fair feedback. It's the antidote to the harmful effects of flattery. When it's offered in the right spirit with the right motive, candor is a gift and a blessing to the one who can receive it. Candor can put you on the path to effectiveness. Now, I'm going to share something with you. This is a moment of transparency. This is a big year for me because back in January, I turned 50. Yes, I just said that. A woman just acknowledged her age. Thank you. I earned 50. It's one of those things I'm like, why lie about it? It's like lying about your weight. You can see me. I'm not going to lie about that. And some people, they reach a certain age and we start talking about midlife crisis and all of that. I don't buy into the midlife crisis thing. I call this midlife clarity. And, when you're young, you have all these weird thoughts, and when you get older, you kind of get a little bit more self-aware. And let me just tell you something that I've learned that I can say now at 50 years old. Here's a little bit of 50-year-old wisdom for you. Now, young people, you really ought to write this down because this will save your life. Okay? Very simple here. Don't do what isn't working. You learn a few things. You get knocked around a bit. You try some things, and I'm at that place now where there are some things I just know will and won't work for me. And I'm still learning that. But certain ways of reacting, certain situations that I'll just jump into, certain things I'm like, you know what? That hasn't worked yet. Why would it work now? Don't do what isn't working. You go through an age, like in your 20s and maybe into your early 30s where you think you know everything. I've got 2 kids in their 20s now. They kind of have gone through that. I've got another 17-year-old kind of coming up, and they're sort of entering those years where, they know everything. And I'm sitting here thinking, yeah, but I know how that's going to play out. And they say, hey, Mom, I want to do this and that and what, and I'm like, yeah, are you sure? Let me know how that goes for you. My favorite thing to hear in the world is, Mom, you were right. I love that. Score! So you reach then into maybe your 40s and you're like, yeah, you know what? I don't know everything. And I'm at the place now where I've gone kind of a step further, and this is huge. Again, big. You're getting this for free, You're not even paying for it. I don't know what I don't know. That's wisdom. You don't know what you don't know. This is why I have to have people in my life that I trust, that I know love me and respect me and want to see me be effective. I have to give them permission to be candid with me about things that I'm doing that might not be effective. They might be good things, but they're just not as effective as they should be. And I have to give them room to tell me that because I don't know what I don't know. I need them to tell me what I don't know. I've learned that God doesn't spare my feelings at the expense of my character or my effectiveness. It doesn't help me when the people in my life do. People who know me, and especially if they've come into my ministry era, you can ask any of the young folks who work for me. They'll tell you this about Darna. Darna doesn't flatter. I really try not to fall into that trap because I've seen the damage that it can do. And so if you come to me and you're asking me to give some feedback on something where I feel qualified to give some feedback, you're going to get a candid response. Now, I'll ask you up front. I do this with my kids. At least I did when they were in school and asking me these things. They know that Mom's got a degree in English and she's a certified English teacher. So when they had an essay that they were about to turn in, they would say, Mom, would you please look this over? I'm like, okay, now wait a minute. Are you sure? Are you sure you want me to look that over? Yes, Mom, please, would you look it over? I've got to turn it in tomorrow. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to get out my red pen and I'm going to go at this paper. And sometimes they're like, nope. I don't want that kind of input. Other times when it was really something important on the line, they're like, yes, Mom, I need it. I want it to be good. So they know, don't come to me. Now, I will dig deep. I will work hard to find something really praiseworthy to encourage because people need encouragement. But I'm also going to be real honest and give you the feedback that I think that you need to hear. I know that, here, I'm going to read a scripture to you. Proverbs 27:6 says, wounds from a friend can be trusted, but an enemy multiplies kisses. Candor is a kindness. Flattery is not. The truth may hurt, but it also sets you free. I read a book that my son David recommended. I read it a couple of months ago, and I really, really enjoyed it. A big portion of it is about this whole idea of candor. Now, the book is called Creativity, Inc., and it's by a man named Ed Catmull. And great book for management. If you lead any kind of an organization where you want a team that is creative and innovative and really, cutting edge, and how to create that kind of environment, I highly recommend that book. That's a side note. But anyway, Ed Catmull is the co-founder and president of Pixar Animation Studios. These are the people responsible for movies like Toy Story and The Incredibles and WALL-E and Cars and Monsters, Inc. Great, great family entertainment. Great stories, great movies. And this book tells the story of how this studio came to be. And it starts as a dream in this man's heart, his dream to one day animate a feature-length film completely by computer, which had not been done. The technology to do this hadn't even been created. He was a real innovator in his field. And it goes from this dream in his heart to this powerhouse family entertainment industry. Pixar has dominated the world of animation with great storytelling and technical innovation and artistry. And they've done it by creating this unique, sustainable work culture. And it's designed to inspire and to release creativity and to really help people focus their passion. And he attributes a huge portion of their success to this whole idea of candor, of creating this kind of understanding and feedback at all levels of the organization and within this company. And he says, without candor, there's no trust. Without trust, there's no creative collaboration. And for them, a family entertainment industry, creating animated feature films, if they don't have creative collaboration, they are not going to be effective in their industry. Now, their journey to create these incredible, sorry, there's a fly up here. I'm really being annoyed. If I swallow it, I've got some water here. This could go badly. All right. I'm going to read an excerpt from the book, and this is Ed Catmull talking, so these are his words here. Talking about how important candor is to their filmmaking process. He says, candor could not be more crucial to our creative process. Why? Because early on, all of our movies suck. That's a blunt assessment, I know, but I make a point of repeating it often, and I choose that phrasing because saying it in a softer way fails to convey how bad the first versions of our films really are. I'm not trying to be modest or self-effacing by saying this. Pixar films are not good at first, and our job is to make them so. To go, as I say, from suck to not suck. This idea that all of the movies we now think of as brilliant were at one time terrible is a hard concept for many to grasp. When I read that, I was amazed because I love those movies, and I do think they're brilliant. I think they're brilliant storytelling, and I think they're beautifully crafted. And for them to say they all started out terrible, it made me wonder, how on earth do they go then from terrible to brilliant? And they are so committed to this idea of candor. He credits this mechanism that they have for how they can take these movies and make them the way that they do. And it's called the Brain Trust. The Brain Trust, it's a group of smart, passionate people who gather in an atmosphere of trust and mutual respect to evaluate every Pixar project. And they are charged with identifying and solving problems. Now, a couple of rules of the Brain Trust is that your ego and your agenda have to be checked at the door, and that all of your feedback has to be constructive. It has to build, and it has to be directed at the project, not the person, so it's very impersonal. And he shares a number of stories of how these great movies came to be. And I was so fascinated by one in particular where it starts with an initial pitch. One of the directors comes to the Brain Trust and says, hey, I've got a story for a new movie. And I want you to listen to this description of a pitch that a director gave in a Brain Trust meeting. There was a castle floating in the sky, completely unconnected to the world below. In this castle lived a king and his 2 sons, who were each vying to inherit the kingdom. The sons were opposites. They couldn't stand each other. One day they both fell to earth. As they wandered around trying to get back to their castle in the sky, they came across a tall bird who helped them understand each other. That story, in that form, didn't get made. In fact, from that initial pitch, only 2 things survived: the tall bird and the title, Up. Which, if you've seen that movie, is one of the most emotionally rich and heartfelt adventures that I've ever seen in animation. But this original story was pretty terrible. But going through this iterative process over and over again where they tweaked on it and they worked on it and they shared more and they in this environment of trust and respect, they gave their candor to this director. They created a beautiful film. Now, this is an entertainment company that creates animated movies, and they are this committed to the idea of candor. Why would the church, with the mission that we have, with the stakes as high as they are, why wouldn't we be that honest and that forthcoming with one another? Without an atmosphere of candor, even the church can be less effective than it should be. It continues to do what isn't working. We may be producing pretty leaves, but there's no fruit, at least not lasting fruit. Now, if you want to create this atmosphere of candor within your ministry, within your organization, even within your own family, here are some requirements. For the giver, you need to have permission. You need to have permission to give that candor. And what I mean is that atmosphere of trust and mutual respect. The person receiving from you needs to know that you care about them. They need to know that you want them to be effective. They need to know that you have no other agenda other than their good. You need to have a spirit of humility, like Romans 12:3 talks about. It needs to be completely encased in genuine love, like we read about in Ephesians 4:15. It needs to be constructive in nature. Romans 5:2, that is, it builds up, it offers help, it gives direction, it ferrets out potential. It communicates value and appreciation. In ministry leadership, we talk about, the praise sandwich, where you encourage on the one end, then we kind of navigate through that area where we're just going to get real, and then on the other end of it, you build them up and you send them out feeling great. That's what we need to have. For someone who wants to receive candor, if you really want to be effective, you have to learn how to receive candor. You need to have an open heart and mind. James 1:19. And you too need to have discernment, because not everyone who comes and offers you their candor should be offering their candor, or maybe they don't offer it in the right way. And you've got to discern, God, what of this do you want me to hear? And I mean the good and the bad. Because you don't want to get so much great feedback that you fall into that area of flattery and maybe we can become ineffective doing great things. You also don't want to stiff arm negative feedback, okay, out of fear of someone's personal agenda. I had a mentor in my life years ago. I was dealing with an issue where someone had given me some feedback, and I'm like, I don't know what to do with this because it really sounds kind of harsh, but I don't want to dismiss it. And she said, well, then here's what you do. Put it on a shelf and pray about it. Ask God to help you understand, okay, what of this do I need to hear? What do I need to act on? And maybe what doesn't apply? Help me dismiss it. Jesus gave a master class in candor. Just read through the Gospels. Read how he interacted with people. You'll see this phrase over and over again. He spoke plainly. That's his candor. He rebuked when it was necessary. He exercised discretion. He knew when to hold his tongue. John 16:12 says, I have more to tell you, but you cannot bear it right now. He knew there's a proper time and a proper place for candor. He extolled the disposition of children because they personify candor. Who's more frank with you than a child? He had contempt for the Pharisees, who were hypocrites and manipulated with flattery. If you want to be effective, to bear good and lasting fruit, you have to embrace candor, so ask for it. If you want people you love to be effective, offer them the gift of your candor. If we want to change the world, it's not enough to be good. We have to be effective. So why should this matter to you? Why should you care about being effective and not just good? Well, let's go back to the story we started with in Matthew 21. It says, early in the morning, as Jesus was on his way back to the city, he was hungry. Seeing a fig tree by the road, he went up to it but found nothing on it except leaves. He went to the fig tree because he was hungry. There is a hungry world out there, a hurting, dying world out there, and we have to offer them something more than leaves. We have to offer them fruit. Only fruit will satisfy. They're spiritually hungry, and if we're not effective and fruitful in our mission, we cannot help them find what they need in Christ. We can offer pretty foliage, but no fruit. We can offer the trappings of Christianity, but no substance. God created us to be fruitful and productive and effective in all that we do. So I ask you, what are you doing? What are you doing to be effective for the kingdom? What are you doing that maybe you shouldn't be doing? Maybe you've got a lot of great things that you're doing, but you're just spread too thin and it's too hard to be effective in any one area. I've had to let go of a lot of things. A lot of really good things, a lot of things that are fun for me, things that I enjoy doing for the sake of the ministry, for the sake of the effectiveness of the ministry, for the sake of my own effectiveness, and because I want other people that I'm raising up to be effective too. So I have to let go and let them do it. Let them become effective. What are you not doing that you should be doing? Now I want to pray for us, and I really have two different groups of people in mind as I pray. One are those people who are maybe doing too much or doing too much of the wrong things. And you need God to show you what to lay down. What do you need to focus on? Where are you going to be truly effective so that you can do only those things? And I want to speak to those who are maybe sitting on the sidelines, not engaging their gifts for the kingdom, not being as effective as they can be. And maybe it's because you just don't know what to do and you need encouragement. I want to pray for God to send you that encouragement. Let's pray together. Father, thank you. Thank you for this incredible mission that you've given us. The stakes are so high, Lord, and you've given us a great commission. You've given us a job to do, and you've equipped us to do it. And it's an honor. It's an honor to serve you. Lord, I just want to pray for those in this room, anyone in this room who is maybe spread a little too thin. They're trying to do too many things, even good things. I pray, Father, that you would show them those things that they should be doing that they are most effective at, because we need them desperately to do those things. This hurting and dying world needs them to engage their gifts. Father, help them evaluate what they're doing so that they can see those things that you are on, that you've called them to do, and they can do them. And Lord, I pray for those who maybe are a little bit on the sidelines. Maybe they don't know what they should be doing. Maybe they are like Gideon or like Esther, and they just need someone to come to them and speak to their potential and call them out. I pray that you would send them people of discernment, people who can get past the fear and the limitations and tell them, you were born for such a time as this. We all need that kind of encouragement. I pray, Lord, that we would become encouragers, that we would become cultivators of fruit. We do want to bear fruit in your name, and we need your guidance to do that. Give us wisdom. Give us boldness. Help us to create an environment where we become people of substance and we offer this world substance and not just something to look at. Father, we love you. We honor you. Thank you for your presence here today. In Jesus' name, amen.